Hey, welcome back to your Vitamin B12. This is the podcast, and we are talking about the 2016 Bowl reviews. We gave you all of your previews in separate forms, and now we're here to talk about all of the games after they happened in one big show. Joining me, as always, EJ Hayes, Garrett Sauls. We are here to talk about the Big 12 postseason and how we did. Let's start off with LSU Texas Tech. This one was billed to be a high flyer, probably one of the most interesting matches that we thought, because Texas with their air raid and LSU with their amazing running game. So what did you guys think about this one?
This one kind of surprised me in a lot of ways. I think, first of all, this game admittedly probably went how everyone kind of billed it. They probably said, LSU's going to run all over them, and they did. But the first half of that game was really interesting just because I felt like both teams weren't playing how they normally play. Texas Tech's defense was actually stopping Leonard Fournette when they couldn't have stopped anyone all season long, and then their offense doesn't come to play, and then it was just kind of a defensive struggle for a while, and so that was really weird to see with Texas Tech for the first half, but then obviously we get into the third quarter, and that's when the run game starts wearing you down. I mean, you can only pretend to be a defense for so long, and then Tech just lost it. Out-coached, outplayed, out-prepared, out-talented, you name it, they got outed. I think people look at this and say, oh, this is exactly how it was supposed to go. But if they actually watched the game, I thought they probably would have been a little surprised.
Yeah, Texas Tech, their quarterback, Mahomes, he played very, very well. A lot of people were talking on, Twitter, etc. Man, they were just surprised at his arm strength. He was just effortlessly chunking at 50, 60 yards. Many times he would pull the Johnny Manziel trick and kind of run almost to the end zone or almost to the sideline and then kind of cut back. And their receivers are good about watching that and then cutting back too. And they were getting some serious yardage off of stuff like that. I think they. At some point, they were either about to tie or were tied, and they threw a pick close to the end zone, and the game just snowballed after that for Texas Tech. And again, like you said, extremely surprising. They were hitting, Fournette in the mouth big time. It was like, wow, what is going on? It was pretty entertaining for a couple quarters there.
Yeah.
It was pretty exciting. I was enjoying the game. We all talked about how this might be a kind of an exciting game, for the sheer fact you have high-powered offense against semi-high-powered defense versus, running game versus no, run defense. So obviously that, in the end, definitely swayed LSU's way. And I think, Texas Tech did what they did kind of all season, which was show pulse but not be able to keep up at the finish line.
Classic Tech. Tech.
I thought they represented the Big 12 well. I thought they were way overmatched. Completely overmatched. But man, I thought they showed up, and I thought they played well. I was pretty proud, actually. The final score looks pretty bad, but I had to step away from the third and fourth quarter when it got ugly. But when I left the game, my memory says that this was a solid game.
Yeah. So, it was a gutsy performance by them. Their defense being as jacked up like that to play against Leonard Fournette solidly for 3 quarters. There are a few teams that do that. And, again, let's be honest. You look at this bowl matchup. I think Tech ended the season with 7 wins. LSU had 9 in the SEC West. You tell me who is probably the better team there. And I thought they played really gutsy for a long time. And I think that this is going to be an invaluable experience for them. This is going to prepare them for any run game they're going to face in the Big 12, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So they'll learn from this, and I think their defense will come back a little better next year.
Yeah, stat-wise, Mahomes had 370 yards on 56 total passes. He completed 28 of those, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. As normal, Texas Tech's running game completely absent. Leading carrier had 10 carries for 37 yards. So it was close into the third quarter when Tech brought it to 21-20, and then LSU and Fournette just literally ran away with it.
Right there, you say as normal, but Texas Tech had a 1,500-yard back this year.
Yeah, they had the leading back in the Big 12.
Okay, stereotypical.
Yeah. So, no, I think what I'm saying is that was the difference in the game. LSU stopped their run. They gave up 4 touchdowns and 385 yards. That's not SEC-like. But stopping the run, that is very SEC-like.
Look at the successful teams in the Big 12 this year. It seems really kind of across the board, unless you're Kansas State. Well, even Kansas State, but we'll get to that later. But the Big 12's kryptonite is run game. Smash mouth football. I mean, you look at how OU got beat. They got beat by a mobile quarterback in a run game. You look at how OU beat people later on in the season. Everyone wants to tout Baker Mayfield, but it was P. Ryan and Mixon that really did the lion's share of the work there.
Yeah,
so
those two crushed OSU soul. I mean, he wasn't doing anything that we couldn't recover from, but their long runs and their just consistent 12, 15-yard runs just crushed us. So you're right.
Speaking of Kansas State, they end the season at 6-7 with a 23-45 loss to Arkansas, who ends up at 8-5 in the Liberty Bowl. What did you guys see in this one?
I think this was just a classic case of getting out-talented. I think we can all agree that Bill Snyder is probably a much better coach than Brett Bielema. In fact, he was obviously his boss for a long time. So everything Brett Bielema learned, the good stuff, I would imagine, not that being a completely classless jerk, he learned from Bill Snyder. So I guess I had hoped more for this. And again, this is one of those games where it got out of hand in the third quarter. And so it's not like, the final score was, 45-23? It's not like that game was necessarily indicative of how the whole game went. But I guess I expected a little more from Kansas State, considering, they're, I think, the most SEC or Big Ten-like Big 12 team there is. But as we've seen, again, Kansas State's kryptonite is if someone goes up on you with a big lead, they'll never catch back up. K-State likes to grind it out in close, low-scoring games. And I think Alex Collins just – for Arkansas, the amazing running back that he is, just wore down that K-State defense. And again, we have to remember that this is a K-State team that went 6-6. Arkansas did marginally better through their season, but again, we have to temper our expectations and say, okay, well, this K-State team, how good were they this year compared to years past? This is kind of an abnormal Bill Snyder team.
Part of me thinks, this is an odd matchup. Because you've got Arkansas. This is a bad matchup. I think this is an even worse matchup than the LSU Texas Tech. I mean, it's almost like, I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder who's doing these, SEC matchups. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I think Arkansas OSU would have been a pretty good matchup. I think LSU OSU. I think Mississippi State. I mean, again, we were second in the Big 12. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you can never complain about getting, put up against a bigger opponent. In case, that's why we play the games, right? But I don't know. It just seemed very overmatched. I mean, maybe I didn't feel like that before the game, but I definitely felt like that after. So
another thing I should have thought about was just momentum throughout the season. K-State lost momentum throughout the season. They had heartbreak after heartbreak, and it only got worse for them until they finally won that last one, I think, against West Virginia to become bowl eligible. But Arkansas is the inverse. They started out really poorly against the Texas Tech team that has no run defense. Let's remember that. Texas Tech beat an Arkansas team that's known for running the rock. But Arkansas peaked late in the season. I think they went on to beat LSU, if I remember correctly, and a few other people. And so they really kind of trended upward, whereas Kansas State trended downward. And there you go, so.
Yeah, Arkansas did end the season beating LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss, Auburn even. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That one was that was completely backwards as far as momentum goes.
Yeah.
So that moves us on to the Sugar Bowl. Oklahoma State Cowboys take on Ole Miss Rebels. Both teams end up at 10-3, with Ole Miss taking the win, 48-20. Tough one for the home team. EJ, what did you see in this one?
Well, you know, this was pretty bad. This was real bad. We just simply couldn't, move the ball. And it's fine to not have a running game when you can catch passes. We had wide open guys on 3rd and long dropping passes over and over and over. And you can't do both. You can't not run and not catch balls. You got to do something. I mean, we literally did nothing. It frustrates me because of how it looks from a final score perspective and from an SEC Big 12 perspective. It frustrates me that we pretty much did not show up to play. And I don't understand that at all. That's not history for Gundy and Gundy Bowls. It's not history. But, one team has to lose, so, I understand that some team's going to lose. But, I mean, I thought the other team, Ole Miss, their quarterback, looked like he was fired up the whole game. And I thought Mason played extremely well. Like, that dude looked better mobility-wise than he has all season. I don't know what the screw in your foot does to mobility, but evidently it's good. And I thought he was on point. I think we catch 5 of those drops, and he's got over 300 yards, and we're in the game.
Yep.
And then, J.W. Walsh comes in at the end of the game on the second team and scores a couple of touchdowns. And that made it, not so embarrassing. But, it's just like, several things Gundy said after the game of, it was later on, probably just the last couple of days, how he's proud of the 10-win season. And don't get me wrong, I am too. But the last 3 losses were pretty, I don't know. I just didn't feel like we had a pulse. And maybe that's the way we've played all season. We just have been lucky and won some of those close games or whatever. But at some point, you got to consistently play with OU. Mm-hmm. You can't continue to lose to OU like we did this year, especially at home. And so this felt demoralizing, like the OU loss did. Mm-hmm. Demoralizing. So
yeah, this was disappointing. I mean, just because there was a month to prepare, but the reality is that it went exactly like the Baylor and the OU games did. They play competitive for about half a quarter, and you think, okay, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be a good one. It's going to be fine. But then just stuff gets blown up. I completely agree. I think Rudolph played incredibly well, and our receivers played uncharacteristically not so well. People like even David Glidden weren't making their catches. When that happens, it's just not going to happen. But then you have to think, okay, all those missed passes, like you said, they were on 3rd and long. They were on 3rd and 10, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, whatever. And so that's where not having that run game really hurts, because Rudolph can't just pop it to a tight end or whoever and things just magically get better. I do think having our tight ends back helped. I think the offensive line played a little better towards the beginning of the game. Towards the end, obviously, they were deflated. But I think this one just came down to, OSU wasn't prepared. They had the drops. They didn't play their game. They didn't execute well. And let's not forget that Ole Miss has the motivation factor. And they got completely dismantled by TCU last year. And so you better believe that when they're in this scenario again, they have a lot more to play for than OSU does. So, and they showed it. They showed that they wanted to win. You saw how fired up they got at every moment, and they ran with that. And props to them for doing that, for being prepared. But you're right. But looking back on the season, I think again we have to temper our expectations. OSU was a 10-win team this season, but I'm not so sure they're deserving of being called a 10-win team. I think they may be one of the worst 10-win teams in the country right now. There's a lot of good, but let's not forget that half of our wins came, just kind of in some gutsy moments or in some questionable moments or however you want to call it. But it's still an improvement over last year. It's forward progress. So
Yeah. If it wasn't for the TCU win, I would be completely demoralized. That was a dominating performance. And we haven't seen one of those in a while. Just a complete domination of a good team. And we'll get to TCU in a second, but if you don't think TCU has a pulse anymore, we played them with Boykin and Doxson. So, I mean, if it wasn't for that game, because we had, even at the beginning of the year, we struggled with lesser teams. But, I mean, 10 wins are 10 wins, man. You can't take that away from them. Mm-hmm. I'm disappointed in how we played in the bowl game. I thought it was I thought we really needed to show the SEC at least we just needed to show them something more than we did. Mm-hmm. That was not good. But I'm curious to see how Gundy, brings this around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great experience for all those players. This is going to be motivation for the next year to have an embarrassing loss to an SEC team. I think that they learn a lot from it, and so I'm optimistic. But we'll talk about OSU in the future later on for sure.
Yeah.
Real quick, was to tell you when the rushing leaders from both teams were quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not good.
J-Dub led Oklahoma State with 10 carries, 74 yards, which we know he can do. Chad Kelly led Ole Miss 10 carries, 73 yards.
Yeah.
So, all right, that actually brings us to the one and only college football playoff game that the Big 12 was in, maybe for the foreseeable future after this bowl season. OU Clemson. OU drops it 37-17. I like that I didn't even have to call on you.
The first thing is when so you can't play without your horses, right? You can't run a horse race without your horses. As far as I know, Clemson didn't lose their quarterback. They didn't lose their running back. They didn't lose anybody, right? During the game, right? When OU was in this game, they were winning at half. I mean, they were winning at half. They were ahead, right? So when Mayfield got hit and went out of the game, in addition to both Pirine and Mixon at some point going out of the game, coming back in and going out again, at that point, the momentum was lost so much for OU, and you're not getting it back at that point. If you don't have Baker Mayfield to do something, and that running game to be scared of, to be keep people at home, keep those linebackers, keep those safeties at home, you're not going to be able to keep up with a fully functioning offense like Clemson. You're just not going to do it. So
we saw. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
No.
But yeah, it's funny. The game was out of hand before Mayfield even got injured. I know Mixon got injured later on, but I mean Clemson just had this one in the bag. Big game Bob showed up for sure. And then, I mean, another important thing to talk about is as much as people herald Baker Mayfield and as talented as he is, the guy still has some learning to do. If you're the star quarterback and you've been in this position before, you saw what happened with TCU. You saw how they almost came back into that game and won it because your star quarterback went out for a concussion for a similar play. You just don't put your head down. Don't be a tough guy. Just go down. Just go down and live to make another throw. Live to scramble again because you're not doing your team any favors by lowering your helmet like that. It's just a little immaturity, I think. You want to be a tough guy, that's fine, but this is what happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous when someone puts the whole team in danger. He pretty much ruined the hopes of everybody by being that player. But it's almost counterintuitive. You think he's a tough guy or he's playing with grit, and that's cool and all. But it's also selfish because if you're trying to play with grit because you think you're bad or something, whatever, it's selfish if you're trying to do it in a way that puts you above the team to make yourself look good. Mayfield plays with a lot of swagger, and and I'm not saying you can just turn that off and go, yeah, okay, I've got an NFL future. I need to slide here or whatever. But you're right. He has to learn that. That is part of the game. Being out on the sideline is, I'm pretty sure, not part of the game.
Yep.
That's a bad strategy for this game.
But even all that said about Mayfield and everything like that, even if OU didn't have those injuries, I don't think they would have won this game. Because the reality is that Deshaun Watson is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He's a true passer, and he knows when to run. He has that maturity and that balance that maybe Mayfield is still working towards. Obviously Mayfield's immensely talented, and he can play at that level. But Deshaun Watson plays at that level every week, and he really proved it this week. And then another thing to consider is that I think Clemson had 200-yard rushers. They beat OU the way that they got beat by Texas. That was their kryptonite. Again, run game. So, Clemson, Dabo Swinney, they just came with a better plan, and Big Game Bob, and I think the Sooners just got a little too cocky. That's all we ever heard was how they were world beaters and they could go play the Steelers or something like that. But the reality is they kind of got brought back down to earth. I think they'll learn from it. I mean, they've got a heck of a schedule next year, but this is going to be a good experience for them. But, yeah, their revenge list is going to woefully remain incomplete.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Clemson hate is pretty high in Sooner land currently. But, you can't hate a team that just beat you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You may hate the situation, but you can't just hate them because they beat you, because they straight beat them.
Yeah.
I think the Pirine injury earlier was the changing point of the game. I'm not saying Mayfield. The game was out of hand with Mayfield, but Pirine got hurt early. And if you remember in the first drive, Pirine was the guy busting 20-yard runs and all that. He was the game changer, because Mixon is the guy that comes in, you're like, oh, they're going to pass, right, because Pirine's out. Then Mixon kills you, right? And then you're like, okay, Pirine's back in. Then they pass. That's a really good situation to be in when all your horses are ready. But when Pirine went out, that whole thing that they do, it doesn't work.
Again, that's OU's strength is to have that run game, kind of like a strange option type of thing, where you have Pirine, Mixon, Mayfield, all these guys. Obviously Mixon can run in the slot. Pirine can do pretty much everything, and he's your power runner. No one's going to stop him. But boy, you take the threat of that out, all of a sudden Baker Mayfield and the OU offense gets awfully predictable. So it's
a quick question. Now that you've seen Clemson against, we'll say, a real opponent, because the ACC was questionable. I won't say real because they pretty much dismantled OU.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. A team that we're familiar with that was pretty much dominating Big 12 teams, in which they were winning at halftime on Clemson with all their horses. Again, how do you think they'll fare against that nastified defense we saw in Alabama tomorrow night?
That's a good question. I think if it's all contingent upon a lot of things. If Clemson's O-line comes to play, you have to like Clemson's chances. I mean, you look at how Bama has lost, and it's to a team like Ole Miss, a team that can sling it and throw it on their corners. Maybe not a team that'll grind it out with them, but a team that'll just beat them with explosive plays like that. But that's all dependent upon whether or not Deshaun Watson and that backfield can work. Alabama's defensive line, those are a bunch of grown men right there.
Oh, my God.
And so it could be a long night for Deshaun Watson if their offensive line doesn't get that protection. So it's hard to say. I don't know. It just depends on which Clemson shows up and which Alabama shows up. If the Clemson that plays OU shows up, I don't know. I kind of like Clemson. But if the Clemson that plays South Carolina shows up, that's going to get ugly. So it's just hard to say.
Yeah. Well, I think... And I'll be quick, Chris, because I know I'm eating up your time, but I've been thinking about this, and I think, in recent history, you have teams like Oregon with Mariota that went against a good defense, and they couldn't keep up. Even Mariota couldn't keep up, right? I think the most recent was Auburn with Panthers guy, Cam Newton.
Cam Newton.
Yeah, he outdid, a team. But I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think you come into that game with something similar to what you do, but a little different with a little different wrinkle, so that you're not only keeping them on their heels, because if they know what you're going to do, they're going to defend it and they're going to crush your soul.
Yeah.
So I think you have to game plan a little bit for it, but we can move on past that. But I was curious on what you thought about Clemson against.
And I do like them. They stopped Pirine, and I think Pirine is just as talented as Derrick Henry is. A lot of people want to sing Derrick Henry's praises. Wow, he rushed for 2,000 yards. Okay, great. That's impressive. That's no.
I could do that. I could rush for about 1,000 on that with that offensive line, and that's really saying.
And that's it. It's all that offensive line. But Clemson's got two good backs too, and they stopped Pirine and they stopped Mixon. They've stopped formidable run games before, so I think predicting it, we're just gonna sound silly afterwards because who knows what's gonna happen. I think this is a great matchup, though. I will say for the Natty, just to put that in there. I know it's not Big 12 related, but these are two really dynamic teams, so it'll be fun to see them, even if they're not Big 12.
Clemson did look really good against OU. But it's just hard for me to bet against Alabama, given
they've been there. They've been there.
Given what they did to Michigan State, dear God, they literally made them cry and go home.
Yeah,
that was bad.
I know the Big 12 did bad this bowl season, but I'm also equally glad that the Big 10 did just about as bad too.
Mm-hmm.
I think my one thought after Michigan State lost and after Northwestern lost and all these, I'm just like, can we stop pretending that the Big 10 plays good football now? Can we please stop?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about good Big 12 football and West Virginia pulling a home game out from Arizona State in the Cactus Bowl. West Virginia squeaks this one out 43-42 on a late touchdown pass with about 2 minutes to play. What did you guys see about this one in the desert?
So this was the late game. This was everybody went to bed and it was still going on for 2.5 hours, that game. We talked about this being an interesting matchup because it would, the whole, this being a home game for Arizona State. Arizona State sucks at home. West Virginia's not very good away. Those sort of things. It was one of those things where, West Virginia, what did they want for Christmas? They wanted a 200-yard passing game. Well, they got a 500-yard passing game.
Yeah.
So there's that. And two, I think this was pretty much what we thought it might be. It was, I think both teams showed up.
Yeah.
I think it was back and forth. I think Dana had to pull some stuff out of his rear, which he loves doing. And I thought it was a great little matchup, and it ended up being a pretty exciting game, and Big 12 got the win. I'm pretty proud of West Virginia for this win. I'm not saying Arizona State is, the baddest team out there, but I tell you what, this was exciting, and this was a good win for the Big 12.
Yeah, this was the Dana we all know and love.
Oh, yeah.
Just jacked up on 5 Red Bulls, hair flowing in the wind. The Dana we know and love, it kind of reappeared. And I think probably because he had to. I think he was kind of in the hot seat with a lot of West Virginia fans. And I still think they're probably not very happy with him and the way their program's in right now because they're used to success. But, again, that's a whole other reason. It's because they're playing big boy football in the Big 12 now and not in the Big East. So, it's just different. But they got to be happy with the way that went down and to have that passing yards and to see Skylar Howard actually play to his potential because the dude can sling it. We've seen him, sling it all year, but sometimes he makes bad decisions. Sometimes
he's on his back. That's his problem.
Yeah. And sometimes his receivers aren't paying any attention whatsoever to where the ball's at. So it's a combination of things, but it was good to watch them get up for this. And this is what you would expect the Big 12 Pac-12 matchup to be. Late night after dark, high scoring. It was entertaining.
It was entertaining. You want to hear an interesting aside? I was reading on Twitter 5 minutes ago that West Virginia hired Joe Wickline as their offensive coordinator.
What? Really?
That's what I heard. And DeForest is fired.
Ah.
So, yeah. Joe Wickline. So
wow.
they're credited to creating the Diamond Formation in 2010 as assistant coaches at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
So
that'll be interesting to see those guys reunited. You got to, I mean, they have chemistry, so.
Yeah, I don't see how someone who calls plays as a head coach is going to have Wickline as his offensive coordinator.
Uh-huh.
Like, you mean he's going to be your run game coordinator or your offensive line coach? I don't understand that.
That's probably the move. That's probably the logic behind that move is West Virginia was like, yeah, we probably need an offensive line, so let's just put a guy in. Daniel's going to call the plays anyway. So let's just put a guy who's good at offensive line stuff.
So basically his job in Texas, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
But he's still not calling plays.
Right.
He's not going to owe anybody money over it.
So here's an interesting stat that I just found. The over-under on this one was 62. The final score was 85. And I tried to go back real quick and listen to what we called it. I'm almost positive you guys said that this was going to be in the 80s.
Probably. I think that was most of our predictions were like 90, 120.
I said 120 on one of them. I think was it Texas Tech, LSU?
Yeah,
it was. But 80s was pretty good.
Yeah. I think you guys nailed this one. Another one that was going to be really high scoring, the Alamo Bowl featuring TCU and Oregon. 3 overtimes to decide this one.
Yeah, this was amazing. So I'm in a restaurant with some friends, and the game's on, and every time I take a bite and look up, that Oregon has scored another touchdown. I'm like, oh dear God, I need to stop eating, or this is going to be 90. This is going to be my over/under with one team. And so when I left the restaurant, it was 31-0, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So the couple we were having dinner with, we went back to our house, and the little girls are playing and all this good stuff, and she's sitting on. I was like, oh, this is not good. Like, dadgum, Big 12, this is not good. So my friend's daughter's sitting on his lap, and his phone buzzes, and it's like, bzz. She's like, Dad, your phone, because kids are all in tune with phones now, evidently. Anyway, he's like, oh, that's just probably the TCU game hollering, saying it's 90-0 or something. So he looks it up, and he's like, oh my God, turn the TCU game on. So at that point, I think they were down by a touchdown, and of course we turned it back on and started looking at it, and the quarterback, the quarterback I talked about all year, who looked like a freaking stud in the first half, hits his head, gets hit, he goes out of the game, and literally Oregon didn't know how to hand the ball off. They didn't know how to run a play. They couldn't even do a forward pass. I mean, it was that bad. And then all of a sudden our TCU, our fifth-year senior, who had one start in his lifetime, he played well against OU. He comes in and just starts throwing dimes, and this guy is that's freaking awesome, man. And so at that point, I swear to God, if TCU would have went for 2 instead of trying,
God, I know.
I would have thrown something to the TV, because that guy's a total idiot. But
I kept waiting for it. But that's the thing. I think these were 2 teams that we also talked about how they were mirror images of each other.
Mm.
And then we hear the news about Boykin getting arrested for being this freaking idiot, and then people want to hand you the world on a plate. No, I'm going to go punch a police officer. That sounds like a better idea.
Yeah.
So, whatever. But anywho, then it was just like, oh, this is going to be ugly. But then, they survived that first half, and then Oregon gets to see what it's like to be TCU. And give credit to that TCU team and Gary Patterson for just knowing how to win. I think that was the difference. Again, was Gary Patterson and that team just in general rallying around what they had and saying, no, we got a chance. Because that was a gutsy comeback. I don't care who you are, who you're playing. When you got to come back from a 31-point deficit without your stars, even if Oregon doesn't have, Vernon or whatever.
Well, it didn't change their defense, did it?
No, absolutely.
The quarterback that went out wasn't on offense. I mean, sorry, he wasn't on defense.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to their defense? How do you blank someone in the first half?
Mm-hmm. And then to have triple overtimes, I mean, that was easily one of the most memorable and entertaining bowl games. Well, the parts that I watched, obviously I turned it off midway through the second half because it was more like a snuff film at that point. But, when I turned it back on...
What was the real difference maker was they changed from black jerseys to purple jerseys at halftime.
Yes, I love that. I love that superstition. That is incredible.
I'm a super big proponent of changing clothes if something's not going right at half. I have many times changed OSU or forced, like my wife to go put an OSU shirt on at halftime. Many, many times.
Yeah. We need to do a show dedicated on just ridiculous superstitions.
Sounds like Mighty Ducks.
What do you mean ridiculous?
Totally logical and helpful.
A completely logical and scientific superstitions.
Rituals.
Oh my goodness. All right, and our last bowl game of this 2015 postseason, Baylor Bears, North Carolina Tar Heels.
The bright spot.
The one big bright spot of the Big 12 bowls. 49-38. Something that kind of went about the way we were expecting it to go.
It's interesting. I actually didn't think it was going to go this way.
I didn't think it was going to go like that.
I thought Baylor was going to get trounced.
I did too. But, I think we saw Bizarro Baylor.
Whoa.
I think one of you said that early on.
Yeah.
Whoa, Bizarro Baylor. Why are they Bizarro Baylor, Garrett?
Well, we named them Bizarro Baylor because... I'm trying to remember exactly, but...
Well, because they had 680 yards rushing.
Yeah.
What the heck?
And
they did their Baylor thing, except they didn't pass it at all.
Yeah.
Normally they're chunking deep balls and all this. They just did it with the running game.
Yeah. Well,
that's possible.
This is a testament to Kendall Briles and Art Briles because even without anything, they had that month to prepare, and they found a way to score points. I don't know how they did it, but they were scoring points. And
I'll be honest with you. I'm more impressed with that game than I am what they normally do.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they normally do is a little gimmicky, although it works. And trust me, if it wins, it wins. I'm all about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was completely impressive. Like, if they could do that in the Big 12 with the running backs, I mean, I think that's what Texas thought they were going to do. Mm-hmm. Texas didn't have the quarterback situation that they wanted to the last few years. They thought they were going to do. They brought in the Boise guy, and he was going to do the whole crazy run thing and this and that and Wildcat and all this. That's what Baylor just did. I think that's what Texas thought they could do with their 5-star recruits. I'm telling you guys, that was impressive.
Yeah.
Like, and UNC is a good team. I'm just telling you. I'm just completely impressed with Baylor.
Yeah, I thought UNC had the motivation edge. I thought, they were going to play angry. I think they did, but again, I think this was a classic. Just getting completely out-coached. And, the biggest thing is Baylor, everyone talks how they're a system. Well, they changed their system for this game, and it worked.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They did something completely out of character, and they do run a lot.
Yeah, they do.
Baylor's a very balanced team, although it doesn't seem like it because they're chunking the deep ball and you get so many more yards that way. But oh my God, that was just like wizardry in a running game.
I think Jefferson is their main back with I can't remember now. Their main back out now.
Smallwood. No, not Smallwood. That's what you're meaning. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
The guy that's been there torturing us for 4 years.
That guy.
Who?
Yeah, Shock Linwood.
Yes.
Sorry, all I can ever think of with Baylor running backs is Lake Seastrunk, but yeah. Shock Linwood. But yeah, he wasn't there, and they had Jefferson step up and.
Oh, and the quarterback, or that whatever you call him, the guy who played quarterback in against TCU.
Hawthorne? Yes.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, he ran some jet sweeps, some different stuff. I mean, he was pretty impressive.
Oh, his cuts were unbelievable. Like, that guy is a freak.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was cool. That was really cool.
Yes,
that's as an O State fan, hate Baylor like any good O State fan does, but I'm telling you, I was impressed with Baylor.
Yeah, they did the Big 12 proud. That was, I think,
yeah.
the one really. I mean, we saw some good games. Obviously, the TCU win was a win one, but obviously, this was definitely on the grand scale, the big stage and everything like that. Baylor really impressed and beat a quality opponent. Really
so just some stats. Baylor had 111 total passing yards between 4 quarterbacks.
Oh my God.
645 rushing yards. Jefferson accounting for 299 of them.
Oh man.
Chafin had 156.
So wait, he only had 299? I thought he went over 300 and 1,000 yards for the season on the same play.
He didn't. That was like they were running last plays or something, and they
didn't get it.
It was funny because usually Art Briles in like the last minute of the fourth quarter when he's up, he usually likes to like do a Hail Mary and just pour salt in the wound. But he didn't. He kneeled like someone with class. So
weird. Again, Bizarro Baylor. What the heck? Class, running.
Unofficial, official stats, I don't know. It says he did have exactly 1,000 yards on the season.
Maybe he went over 1,000, but they were hoping he'd go 300 too on the same play.
That's impressive for a relief back, So.
Yeah. Really.
But like to me, here's the thing: they had 49 points. All 7 touchdowns are runs, and they did not punt the ball. Apparently.
Oh my God.
Looking at the stats, there were no punts.
Let's talk about that for a half a second. So somebody somewhere in high school, he was a high school guy. I'll try to find the article, but he, and I think Briles read this. He had to have. This guy was like, I'm not going to punt. I'm going to have a strategy of never punting. And so the problem with that is then the defense doesn't get all hyped up on third down to stop you because they know for a fact you're going for it on fourth, and it opens up your playbook on third, and it softens up the defense on third. Yeah. So then third down is more, it's higher probability of getting a first down on third because they're not, putting all their best guys in. They know it's just another play. It's kind of interesting, but, never punting, always going for it on fourth, and basically the probability that you'll win more games goes up by like 7% or 12% or something. It's ridiculous. So I think Briles read this guy's article, I'm pretty sure.
Surely.
Yeah. Dude. Never punted, huh?
That's according to the stats. I did not watch the entire game, and so I can't vouch for that, but there's 0 stats on punting.
Wow.
Well, a mostly disappointing Big 12 postseason, but we did have a few bright spots in there. Fortunately for a couple of those. I think this
SEC wins. Dang.
Yeah, that's true. That would have made this a little bit better.
There's work to do. I think everyone needs to stop running their jaws this next year and then just go to the grind.
Yeah, going into the bowl season, I didn't think that Big 12 had a talent issue. I think they had a perception issue. They did about the opposite they could do to help me with that statement. They reinforced everybody's preconceived notions.
Yeah, that's one thing. So just real quick before we wrap up, this is interesting. So, everyone, Big 12 elitists and people outside the Big 12 always say, the best thing for the conference is to have your flagships like OU and Texas, go to the championships and do this and that. My question for you guys would be, how detrimental do you think it was that OU lost? Because now that OU got embarrassed by Clemson in a college football playoff game, what happens if a Baylor or a TCU is impressive like they were the year previous, like TCU was? Do you think they'll get the shot, or they'll say, oh, well, OU came and they got trounced, so why should we give you a shot? Because the Big 12 clearly isn't deserving.
Well, Alabama lost the first round last year.
Yeah.
So, again, it was Alabama, and they're a juggernaut, if you will. So that situation didn't have to play out this year with the SEC. But I am concerned with that because, say OSU, we've got a young quarterback. We maybe have, BJS coming in. We may have a running team, all these things, right? And it happens to be in a year after that, the debacle of this year. And it's the same thing as in 2011 where we were really good, but we got snubbed because we didn't pass the eye test from ESPN. Well, is this eye test the juggernaut theory plus the SEC bias plus, OU sucked it up in a bowl game when they should have beat everybody? I mean, all these things combined, and we get snubbed for, an ACC team or some, a Notre Dame or someone like that, or a Pac-12 team, So, yeah, I mean, my answer to your question is I hope not, but I'm afraid it is going to hurt us.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'll hurt the perception. But the good news is that the one thing that the Big 12 did change next year, and we'll talk about this in our preseason show, is scheduling. Because boy, oh howdy, the scheduling next year for the Big 12, for some teams, most teams anyway, looks to be pretty resume building.
That's good. I mean, I think Gundy hates it. He does not like playing or being forced. I don't think he minds playing big teams. I don't think he loves it, but I don't think he minds. We've played, Georgia. We've played some big teams in the past. I just don't think he likes being forced. I think that is what pisses that guy off.
Yeah.
You have to play somebody. He's like, nah, don't like it.
Yeah.
So
don't tell me what I can't do.
Yeah, don't tell me what I can't do.
So here's what I think that I think it does hurt us big time. I think it's gonna maybe 2 to 3 years. It's gonna hurt the Big 12, and not just OU's loss, but Oklahoma State's loss, and K-State's loss. I'm sorry, Texas Tech's, K-State's loss, our loss, because they're SEC teams, and then OU's loss because it was on the national stage. I think it's going to have pretty major repercussions for the next couple of years.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we will talk about this more in our 2016 preview show, but I think the only way to get around that is this committee and these writers, they have long memories when it comes to who won the big games. But they kind of have short memories when it comes to who won in the season. So I think if we can schedule some of these SEC teams and these Pac-12 teams early on, then we can have the shot during the season.
Yeah.
If they can go back.
That's the only way around it after what just happened. That's the only way around it. Our shot at not having to play SEC teams in the regular season was this bowl season. Mm-hmm. We screwed it up.
And maybe, fortunately, that this new rule, again, we'll talk about later, this new rule comes into the Big 12. Maybe it comes in at, the perfect time because we sucked it up this bowl season against the major conferences. So, I think that's maybe the only way around it.
Yeah, I think you're right. That, and it might very well, barring what happens next year, force the expansion hand, but that's a topic for another time.
Yeah. All right, well, this has been the Big 12 postseason review. We've alluded to it a little bit earlier, but we're going to have maybe 1 or 2 shows coming up, one a 2016 preview, and then we might do something a little bit special and just go completely off topic and talk about something related to a little bit of pop culture, but we will definitely let you know when and if that happens. But we should be coming back to you sometime in the next week or so to look at the 2016 season, how that's shaping up, maybe talk about a little bit of recruiting, although we don't really want to do that. But now that it's solidifying a little bit and getting close to signing day, we might bring that in. But we'll talk about schedules, and we'll talk about rule changes within the Big 12, and possibly expansion. So, Garrett, thank you for joining us. EJ, thank you for joining us as always. Real quick, let's end the show. I have one question for you. Is there and let's not get into it too much because we could talk about maybe in the preseason show for next year. Is there too much time between the end of the season and the bowl games? Is there too much time for these kids to be off and to scout and just to get out of the rhythm of the game?
Well, so overall, I thought the bowl season was a little wacky, and I think some of that lends itself to getting out of the rhythm of football. You had some bowl games that were just high scoring. You had some bowl games that were completely lopsided, like one of the teams literally didn't show up. You also have the idea of, you're pretty dinged up, or at least a lot of the Big 12 teams were dinged up. It allowed those guys to get semi-healthy. So there's two ways to look at it. You really, if you're, SEC or whoever else has these championship games, it allows them to get their feet under them from an injury perspective. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we want that because we want everybody to have all their horses, right? But, then on top of that, you have, idiots like Boykin, who literally had 0 blemishes his entire career, probably had an NFL career, probably gone now, get in trouble. And again, that happened during the bowl week. That wasn't necessarily, whatever. He was having fun during one of the bowl week nights or whatever. But I think it is a little long. But if for example, if OSU were in the national championship or in the college football playoffs, and like the whole Mason Rudolph thing had an injury in the last game, I would definitely want some time for those guys to heal. So I think it's actually appropriate. I think it's okay.
Yep. I agree for a few reasons. Obviously, the reasons that EJ just mentioned. I think the preparation and injury recovery time kind of outweighs the losing momentum, or getting in a rhythm type of thing. And then I think the cherry on top, the convincing thing for me is that these bowl games occur when everyone's off, when all of us are off work, because otherwise I wouldn't get to sit and enjoy all these games. Because I'm not going to go request off, and I'm going to be worthless at work if I have like a game up in a browser window or something like that. So I love the timing of it. I love that bowl season is, that week right after Christmas and everything like that, and leading up to New Year's. I think it's just perfect timing for everyone to watch them, and so I like it. I think it's fine. If we get into an 8-team playoff, maybe that changes. Maybe they bump it up a little. I don't know, but we'll just have to see.
Hashtag even Glidden wants to be healthy and wants his opponents to be healthy. All right. All right. Thanks again for joining us. This has been the Vitamin B12 podcast. Check us out. If you want to make sure and watch us live, make sure to subscribe, and we will see you next time.